microscopic level, they exist to kill. They travel, they attack, they hide, they even gather together in defense maneuvers. Pathogens are the enemies of every member of the healthcare team. On Pathogens and PPE, we give you the tools you need to fight these threats and win. So sit back, tune in, and let's make these microbes tremble at the sound of your name.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 9 of Pathogens and PPE. This is season 2 of this podcast, and I'm Jill Holdsworth, your host, and I'm an infection preventionist from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm joined today with my co-host, Mr. Brandon Gantt. Brandon, thanks for being here today.
I'm super excited. Anything for you, Jill, of course.
Thank you.
Again, I'm Brandon Gantt, and I am the manager of training, education, and quality for the Christiana Care System. And I'm super excited about our topic today.
Awesome. And today we are going to be diving into everything about borescopes, one of my favorite topics and one of my favorite things to use in sterile processing and endoscopy and everything in between. So today we have 3 amazing guests, and I am going to just go around the horn and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. And I am going to start with Mr. Aaron Preston.
Hi, Jill. Hi, Brandon. Great to see you again. As Jill said, my name is Aaron Preston. I'm a field specialist with infection prevention, specializing in sterile processing and endoscopy for AMBU USA, and it's really great to be here.
Great. Thanks so much, Aaron. We're happy to have you back. I think this is your 3rd time on this season. 4th, maybe? I can't even keep track anymore. All right. Now going around, Cheron. For those that don't already know Cheron, go ahead and give a quick background.
Well, hey guys. So my name is Cheron Rojo, and I am senior manager of clinical education at Healthmark, a Getting a Company. Been with the company for now, over 7.5 years.
Awesome. And Jahan.
Well, yeah, thank you, Jill. This is a great pleasure and honor being at this podcast. Yeah, I'm Jahan Azizi. I'm a special program manager with Healthmark, Getting a Company. And I've been with Healthmark about 6 years, but prior to that, I worked at Food and Drug Administration, work at hospital and other industries. So I've been around for some time. I think total about 4 years and been in healthcare-related activities.
We have all the experts right here with us on this podcast, so let's get started. So we're talking all about borescopes, but some people that are listening today may not have any idea what I'm even talking about. So let's just give a little bit of a background. What is a borescope? What's it used for? And what does it even do? Jahan, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I kind of got involved with borescope really in 2009. If you go back to when we had that issue with the shaver, and Food and Drug Administration, FDA, got involved with CDC, and they were trying to convince the arthroscopic shaver manufacturer to look inside that. And 2 companies in particular, Stryker and Smith and Nephew, they decided to put that in an IFU, but since at the time there were no borescope, they said endoscope. So actually you had to use a special endoscope to do that. But over years, borescope technology has really evolved. At the beginning, they didn't have a chip on the tip per se. It was just a long, narrow tube that would go inside a lumen, a cannula, and then reflect that light and comes back to a chip, then chip that basically transferred that to a screen. But today's technology, today's borescope is really actually a lot more sophisticated. And they have the chip at the digital, the tip of the scope, and that photo basically get transmitted to some kind of media to see or to record.
Cheron, can you tell us what you're seeing out there as far as how borescopes are being used today in practice?
So what we're seeing out there, which is just one set of eyes versus a lot of people that go out in the field, is we're seeing flexible endoscopes, GI, bronchs. We're seeing borescopes used with that. We're seeing shavers, which did a study that was actually just published this year, in the beginning of the year. And another thing that I'm seeing is that they're using it for other lumen devices, but specifically loners. I've been seeing that a little bit more frequently, which before I was not. So I'm kind of happy to see that, because loners, as you know, could be a lot of trays with a lot of lumens. So, but again, I'm just one pair of eyes, but borescopes have been really expanded on, I got to say, because before it was just really an endofocus, and now we're seeing them really going into a variety of lumens into the sterile processing realm.
Okay. But Aaron, from an infection prevention standpoint, how do borescope and inspections strengthen a hospital's overall infection prevention strategy?
Yeah, Brandon, that's a really good question, because that kind of goes into the efficacy. If you're going to do an intervention, why are we doing the intervention? And really, from my experience, there's two reasons that they're doing this. One is because usually something might happen during the actual procedural case. Maybe it was especially bloody. Maybe they deployed stents and maybe they couldn't find a stent or something. And so they might want to see if there's something stuck or inside the lumen, even though you follow the manufacturer's IFUs for the actual pre-cleaning and manual cleaning, and you want to make sure that it in fact worked because of the difficulty of the case. The other one, which I don't think has been teased out as much, but I'm starting to hear from colleagues or from others in the community, is that our endoscopes are getting older. They're being used sometimes for past maybe even their end of life, and they're wanting to see what is the inside of these lumens looking like now that we're extending the shelf life of that endoscope. And the only way to do that is to physically use a borescope to go in and view that lumen.
Aaron, just to kind of continue on with the endoscope talk, the first time that you and I really ever used a borescope is when Jahan taught us to use them with a study we did with Corey Ofsted about retained moisture in endoscopes. Can you talk a little bit about using a borescope in that way to see if there are water droplets inside these scopes?
Thanks, Jill. Yeah. When the first time I touched the borescope, I had zero idea what I was looking at, right? Like, you go in and it's like wandering into this magical new world and you're not sure what you're looking at. There's all kinds of things. There's things that look like they've been scratched. There's weird colors that you see on the inside of this. There's transition points. And really it's kind of like, well, what do I see? What's normal? What's not normal? And so that kind of goes into setting up a borescope program and finding the borescope for the size endoscope or the lumens that you want to look at, because not everything is the same size. And then the second part is the actual education, not just on physically how to manipulate and use it, but also once you're looking inside, what is an expected find, and then what is considered abnormal.
Now, Cheron, I want to ask you something quickly. When I go to conferences and I talk about borescopes, I always ask people first to raise your hand if you have a borescope in your sterile processing area. And people are so proud. They raise their hand. Yeah, me. They're really excited. And then I ask them to keep their hand raised if they're looking inside the lumens of their instrumentation. And then everybody gets kind of a little embarrassed and they giggle and their hands go down. And so I'm really shocked by that, but sort of not shocked. So how do we get more people to actually use their borescopes? They've purchased them. They've gotten past that funding issue. And then, I don't know, are they sitting in boxes? What do we think is the holdup here?
So obviously in conferences, that's one way to go, right? And usually when we do conferences with studies and articles showing basically supporting the borescope technology and inspection, it's going to be typically your leadership. It's not going to be really a whole lot of text. So I just ran into this recently where I provided education in a facility to the frontline teams and found out that, and it was really easy to identify walking in, that they had borescopes at every station. And when I looked, they were all damaged. All of the catheters were damaged. And there was light coming through every which way, kinks everywhere. And one of them just had a control box and there was no catheter at all. It was like gone. But after and of course, management said, oh yeah, we use them every time. And then you know how that is, right? It's like a good policy and procedure. And then you go out and doesn't match, to what you're seeing. And then the staff are looking, oh, no, we haven't used that in a while. Or I stopped using it because it's too dark. So I really think that education, again, we always say that education is key, but it really is, because it's not education through webinars. That's one way, and conferences, but going to the frontline teams themselves and explaining to them how important this is, and even telling stories, which, you know with me, with my daughter, I talk about that with installation testing, but I just kind of drive home of that why, right? This is what you need to be doing, and this is why. And if something is broken or it doesn't work, or you have confusion on even how to use it, you need to let your leadership team know that, because that's the other thing that I see is that they got an in-service a year ago and they forgot, or they weren't there for the initial in-service.
Yeah, great points.
Yeah, Cheron, that really actually reminded me of an actual somebody who reached out to me. They started using borescopes, and they found this film that was on the inside of their endoscope, and they had no idea what it was there, what was causing it. They just knew it was abnormal and it wasn't right. And so I think that brings up two questions is that a facility needs to answer. Is one is, if you're going to find something, what are you going to do with it? What's going to be your cutoffs for sending it off back to the manufacturer? Because you still have cases to do. You have volume. So at what point is the damage or the observations you're making worrisome enough to send it back to for repair or for evaluation? And then the second one is that you may see something, and guess what? It was always there. It may have been there for a very long time. You're just now observing it and seeing it, which is great from a process improvement standpoint, because now you've identified the issue and you can start working on causations and solutions.
So these are all some really great talking points, especially like education. Jahan, what does training look like for a borescope? Like from proper preparation, inspection, all the way through to documentation, what does that look like for the technician?
So when I go to, especially like when I had the training with Jill and Aaron, I looked at that. So I'm going to be here for a certain amount of time, then I'm going to leave. I just want to make sure that whoever is going to use this scope, this borescope, it be enough to a point that they shouldn't have any questions. So the first thing, obviously, how to operate the borescope, because there's a lot of nuances different between various borescopes. But then what areas that you need to look at that? For example, you're talking about a long tube of endoscope, could be 2 meters long, but there are some areas that are a lot easier to quickly look and find out issues. As you mentioned, anytime you have a transition point, anytime you have a bend. So once you show them what it is and what to look for, that's important, because you could see a red marking on the outside of a jacket. That's not really defective in the scope, could be a manufacturing thing. So the first one is that how to use the borescope. Then the second one, once you see something, interpreting that is important. And that's really come up to maybe leaving some sample pictures, maybe showing them that this is what it is. And when I finished with it, then I would say that, Aaron, do you want repeat, see what I did? So teach one and then observe one, and then make sure that really they receive your point and moving forward with that. But I think once you do that and watch them, not one, maybe do 3 or 4 or 5 testing, then I think you when I feel comfortable, then I know that Aaron or whoever is going to use it is going to feel comfortable as well.
And then to add that to Jahan's comment, also, what does damage look like to the borescope? I think that's a very, like I just said earlier, they don't know what damage is. They just see a blurred image and maybe they don't know how to remedy that. Is there a focus? Is the catheter damage, or is it the control box? So really understanding the borescope of what does damage look like with, let's say, the control box or the catheter or both, or the holder or whatever it may be. And also if there's any glitches within the software, whatever is provided, knowing how to remedy that as well, and who to contact. And is it something that's repaired, or is it something that's replaced?
Or is it water, or does the lens just need wiped off? I can't tell you how many times we had to just wipe off the lens, or we were going through water droplets during that first study. So obviously there was water getting on the lens, and so it impeded our vision. We'd have to pull it back out, we'd have to wipe it off, and then we'd have to start back over. So it depends on kind of what you're seeing, what you're having to push that borescope through, and then you're going to have to to wipe it off. So it may not be broken, but it might look like it's broken because you've got a dirty lens.
So Aaron asked a question that when you see something, what do you do with it? I think you may have the scope been in use for months or years, but you didn't know. Since you know now that there's something, you need to look at that. Then you need to kind of say that I have tendoscope, 2 of them has this issue, the other one. But if you see, for example, pinching, you know that pinching, you're not going to be able to clean that scope. So that scope needs to be set aside. But now you know about it, and if something happened, obviously, you could be liable for that. So it's important that some of the damages should not be put back in use, and you need to remove those from service. But if you have a lot of scratches here, and then you can make that determination based on the availability of the products and the scope or anything that you use to put it back in use or set it aside.
And I will say you get better as you go on. I mean, the first time you use a borescope, you're not really sure what you're seeing. You don't know if it's a scratch, if it's lint, if it's a brush bristle, you have no idea what these things are. And as you keep going, you really get more used to what you're seeing and you get more proficient at it. So the more you do it, the better. And it's even easier when you use AI software to help you out. It definitely enhances what you're seeing and how you can detect things as well. Okay, I want to move on to a different topic, the SHEA guidelines that came out, I think, last year. There was an interpretation in those SHEA guidelines that there was no place for borescopes, no recommendation for borescopes in sterile processing or endoscopy because there weren't any studies that could prove that there was a prevention of infections. So I want to talk about that for a minute and see what we're feeling, see if we feel like that's valid and if that's really the message that we should be putting out there as what I would call us as the borescope experts. Cheron, what do we have to say about that?
So I can say that that's not valid to go and say that to our sterile processing out there in our departments based on how many studies that are out there. And if anything, the most recent one that you guys did with Corey and then mine, I mean, we spoke on the same main stage, literally almost back to back or the next day. So there are studies out there. And then on top of all of that, and Jahan can speak to this, we have instructions for use, let's say with shavers, that actually state to use a borescope specifically in decontam after you clean it. So I think that we have enough studies out there and instructions for use for the use of borescopes that we have to be very careful of what we're basically preaching out there. There's a lot of recommendations and standards. I mean, we have Amy, there's all kinds, but I think that we also have to look at best practice. And I know you guys agree with me with this one. And of course, the golden ticket, which we refer to as the IFU.
Absolutely agree with you on that one. And some of the IFUs, as we mentioned in our HSBA presentation too, say to inspect all surfaces. And that means the inner surfaces, the inner lumens, the outer surfaces. And even though the only item it says that's required is a magnifying glass, you cannot get to those inner surfaces, those inner lumens, or the insides of those attachments with a magnifying glass. The only way that you can inspect those inner surfaces is with a borescope. So if you want to follow the IFUs, which you do, and you must use a borescope. Jahan, what do you think about this?
No, exactly. That's how, as you indicate, that every instruction for use or IFU say that to inspect, visual inspection. So the only way to visually inspect inside any lumen, you have to use some kind of borescope. So that's really part of that. But again, like as Cheron mentioned, some manufacturers say that in particular you use a borescope, for example, for the shavers. But the other issue is that really when they say that you cannot really prove that it's causing infection, we had cases, documented cases. The one that we had in Methodist Hospital in Houston in 2009. CDC said that the infection was caused by the use of shaver. So that's how we actually started at the issue of using borescope. As I indicated at the beginning, in 2009, there were not borescope in the market. So a lot of manufacturers did not really say that use a borescope. They said use an endoscope. And this Food and Drug Administration gave us a grant to University of Michigan. And we did a study that it was buying brand new instruments, endoscope, and various surgical instruments, and following them over a year period. And we found out that in this process, actually looking inside them brand new and being in use, that the debris accumulates over time. And once the debris accumulates, you cannot remove it. So the only way to find out that if the inside lumen of any instruments have debris accumulated is use of the borescope to go inside and look, see if they're there. One example was that we purchased brand new arthroscopic shaver. And then day one was really nice and clean, brand new. 3 weeks later, they start accumulating debris, and they were actually rust inside these shavers. So once that accumulation happened, it's going to build up, and the cleaning is going to be more difficult. So I followed that more and more. I found that the accumulation is more now, because once you have the surface with the rust and debris, and you cannot remove it as it goes through the autoclave and sterilization process, it's going to dry it out, then it's going to accumulate more and more. So when somebody comes and says that we have not really looked at this as being the cause and effect, it is really, you have to look to see what is inside those, the potential of cross-contamination with those instruments, because you didn't see what it is, and then you didn't look at cleaning effectively. Just going back to the shaver, we found out that you cannot really clean a shaver with one type of brushes, because you have different orifices, different sizes, so you have to look at it and clean it effectively. If you don't have a borescope, you don't know really, did your brushing following manufacturer, or have you removed those debris or not? So I think going back, yes, is required to do visual inspection, and the only way to look inside the lumen is use a borescope.
Yeah, great point. Brandon, I'm going to throw a question over to you, also from the SHEA guidelines, where it talks about competencies in training and how it's very difficult to train on a borescope. As somebody who is an expert at using a borescope, in my opinion, and also somebody who's an expert at educating, what are your thoughts on that, and how difficult or not difficult it would be to train staff in an SPD to use borescopes?
I first started working with borescope in 2000, and I did not have any formal training at all. Somebody handed me a lumen and somebody handed me the borescope, and I went. I didn't know how delicate they were, and I didn't really know what I was doing initially, but I kind of found my way through it. I have a class right now here at my organization, and one of the first things we did with instrumentation training is to look through lumen items for borescope. It's fairly easy. I think as long as you have the IFU from whatever the manufacturer is for the borescope, and you mention to them that it takes time. It's not a race. You're just doing simple inspections. It's easy to get them to understand. It's for their protection. It's for the protection of the patient. And so when we have those lumen items, it takes nothing but a minute to kind of go through carefully, gingerly, to make sure that what you see on the inside is not actual bioburden. I even said that to my staff a few days ago. I said, there's something on the inside of this lumen, and it was an actual water bubble. But, they got to see me with the borescope and how easy it was, and that it's something that's natural. It should be a part of our normal workflow. It's something that every department should have now. And I think it only makes us better when it comes to quality. So we can safely say without a shadow of a doubt that we've looked through our lumen items, there's nothing in them, and they are safe for patient use, because before the borescopes, what did we have? Like you said, lighted magnifiers. So there was really no way of determining what was inside of an item.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, as an IP who learned to use the borescope, how would you say your learning experience was?
I mean, it was a fast acceleration. Again, I explained earlier, I really didn't realize what I was looking at, but then the ability to continuously reuse the borescope with feedback on what was being observed while using the borescope quickly escalated my knowledge. And by the time I was done, I was able to actually help others within the department. Two things. A, see the results of the reprocessing efforts they had, and it actually led to process changes because they could see water and other things still in the scope. And then B, they were then trained on items to look for of consequence or interest. And so it developed deeper collaboration with my reprocessing techs because we were working cohesively together and the outcomes. And so in the end, it was a long process, but it was a very positive one.
I do want to make a comment with Brandon's statement that the technology before borescopes, all we had was prayer. That's really what we had.
And hope that nothing was in there, but you kind of knew it was in there. Now we're just confirming what's in there. I've heard people say that a lot. Now we just can confirm what we always kind of thought was stuck up in there.
Yeah, but I think it's a great tool because it enhances your ability to create like documentation. So we can do like quality reports at the workstation because something is, we found something, and we can create like an escalation path for this item, whether it's sending it out for repair or maybe even doing education at the point of use because a lumen wasn't flushed properly. So it just creates more documentation for all of periop, from sterile processing back to nursing or the end user. So that way they can correct issues that they may be having with flushing appropriately.
Well, on the other hand, is that really when you're successful and you don't find anything, that's great outcome of this, because as you said, you improve your process and you find out what you need to do. That is really positive for patient as well. So you know that what instrument you sent to the operating room, it was debris free, it was clean, it was sterilized, and then you know that something that you have to put behind you. So at least you know this process working.
All right, guys, as we start to wrap up this episode, I am going to ask each of you to give the listeners one go and do where they can do something right now today to improve or start their borescope program. And I'm going to go around, and Brandon, I'm going to end with you. So Jahan, why don't you start us off?
I think, as I said, we had shaver as one that we know that the manufacturer's IFU said that you need to use a borescope to look at that. Get a borescope, look at your shavers, and then find out that if it is really being cleaned effectively. And then based on that, maybe you find out tools to clean your shavers. And then from that point on, move to the other more complicated and hard to clean instrument to see that if your cleaning process is effective.
Great, thanks. And we'll move on to Cheron.
Mine's a little bit different. I think talking to SPD leadership or endo leadership is really educate yourself and be a smart shopper, right? Because it's like shopping for borescopes. It's like shopping for anything else. Do your due diligence with research. Just because something is techy and it maybe possibly doesn't break very easily or possibly it's easy to use or whatever, it doesn't mean that maybe you're going to have ongoing education and support. Or in some cases, maybe the lighting isn't really good, but you don't know that because you never had a demo done at your facility on your PCs. So I really just let everybody know that they need to ask the right questions and get demos on their stuff, not on the laptop given to them, and to see if it's a good fit for them and what that ongoing education really looks like and support.
Great advice. Aaron.
I would ask the infection preventionists to go into their decon, talk with their reprocessing techs, and find out what are the lumens of most concern to them, what are the ones that they feel aren't being pre-cleaned well, and look at borescopes that will meet the need of where the concern is, and then collectively work on what type of training and methods would be needed in order to make sure that everyone knows that they're putting out a quality product. There is a lot from Corey Ofsted about how to use borescopes and how to start up a program. So there's literature out there available to help you. And so it's just a matter of grabbing it and then getting with those right people and getting started.
I think one of the things I would work on was probably building staff confidence and competency, whether that was creating like a guide for hands-on training, validation, and continuing education with borescopes to make sure that people are really viewing the right things. Maybe some of our high-risk or complex devices, like Aaron was saying, looking through our laparoscopic and our orthopedic instruments, and just making sure that the staff is confident in using these items. They're educated with the use of the borescope, and they know what steps to take afterwards.
And don't be afraid, too, to end with, also with, Brandon, what you're saying is looking at maybe picking up one lumen a month, like one type of lumen. So everybody's focusing on this one lumen and providing education. And then the next month, you're picking another lumen. I know some facilities look at all their lumens, but some other facilities don't do that. So picking a lumen a month and educating on that and like what are you seeing, I think is smart too.
All right, that about does it for this episode. We hope to see everyone next time for episode 10. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. I hope you learned a little bit about borescopes and you get started using yours in your facility.
Thanks for tuning in to this exclusive podcast series on pathogens and PPE. For more information and clinical resources to help you fight dirty, make sure to follow us on social media by searching for Beyond Clean and Transmission Control.